Welcome, everyone. This is Neeti, and today is our fourth episode where we have a very special guest today talking about your healthy mitochondria and fatigue, how to overcome fatigue. But before we go into the topic, I wanted to introduce myself and tell you a little bit about why we are doing this podcast. So, as you guys know, disease management is so much prevalent. We manage diseases all the time, but we don't think about beyond that. So, the idea behind doing this interview series is to talk disease reversal and to talk about disease remission. And so that's the reason we are talking about healthy mitochondria today with a special guest. And so uh, the person I have today is Dr. Bajnat, who is a board certified family physician, and he's currently the CEO and founder of Institute for Human Optimization, located in Columbia, Maryland. And Dr. Bajnath primary field of interest is understanding the underlying cause of unresolved illness and formulating care plans for resolving those complex medical conditions. So, root cause resolution is on his agenda. And we also know that so many people suffer from chronic fatigue. And we also know that mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. But fatigue and healthy mitochondria is not commonly discussed. And so today we want to learn and discuss the correlation as well as how we can focus on it so that we have better vitality, we have ageful gracing, and we can overcome fatigue. So without further ado, welcome Dr. Bajnath.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, Niti. I really appreciate it. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you again. And Dr. Bajnath, why don't we begin by telling our viewers a little bit about your background, your journey, and why you do what you do?
Oh, well, thank you. I think you did a wonderful job introducing everything there, and thank you for the work that you're doing in regards to spreading the information about health and wellness and vitality. And just a little bit about me. I'm board certified family medicine, as you said, additional certifications in anti-aging and regenerative medicine and functional medicine. And this journey in wellness started for me as a teenager and working at a Whole Foods market when I was in high school before it was trendy and cool, and learning about the nutraceutical supplements that are available out there, and this whole world of integrative and natural medicine. And it's interesting. One of my high school wrestling coaches got me into a technique utilizing dark field phase contrast microscopy to analyze unddenatured blood, to look at the qualitative cellular dynamics of peripheral blood. And when I was a teenager, got certified in the training, purchased a microscope sitting behind me, and went on to further my studies and formalize my molecular understanding of some of the foundations of medicine, with double majoring in molecular microbiology, medical laboratory sciences, and went on to study with some European clinics out of Switzerland, the Paracelsus Clinic of Biological Medicine. Studied some naturopathic modalities with Dr. Peter Diadamo. And then I went to medical school and finished my training and got these board certifications. And another interest of mine is lipidology, as I'm preparing for my boards as we speak for lipidology. But yeah, so that's a little bit about myself. And adjunct associate professor of clinical research and leadership at George Washington University. I'm currently the course director for the Omics of Medicine course, where we teach fellows in integrative medicine on how to connect the molecular dots, from genome to phenome and translational precision medicine. So yeah, that's a little bit about some of the things that I do for fun. I like to train jujitsu and mixed martial arts, and grapple. I've been doing that ever since high school, and very important component to my wellness. Yeah.
That's awesome. And so that's like so many accolades that you have collected. So our viewers are going to just enjoy the wisdom that you're going to just about to share. But from what I heard, that was very interesting that you worked at Whole Foods, and that probably was one of the reason your interest in this nutraceutical world. You were exposed early on, but growing up as a teenager, were you healthy? Did you have health issues? How did you get into the root cause mindset?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. No major issues. I grew up pretty healthy, vegetarian for the most of my life, but then discovered some benefits of animal protein because of the metabolic demand of training and everything else like that. And I got into the root cause with after just going and learning some of the naturopathic modalities. I actually wanted to become a naturopath, but when I was 18, Whole Foods sent me to a conference that's an annual conference in the foothills of North Carolina called Medicines from the Earth. And there I witnessed a lecture from the late Bill Mitchell, the former dean of Bastyr University, on healthcare as a whole and unlocking the healing mechanisms. And that conversation and keynote address for this conference really inspired me to pursue the healing arts. And getting into the microscopy was another major factor of getting into looking at the cells and looking at the milieu or internal
Wow.
microenvironment that influences cellular physiology, chemistry, and disease disposition. So the microscopy and all this was I was kind of introduced in very formidable years and influenced my trajectory. And then I took my first course in functional medicine in 2006 with Datis Karazian and functional blood chemistry, trying to map out the qualitative with the quantitative dynamics of analyzing blood and matching the picture that I see with the actual indices that are found in standard laboratory testing. Yeah.
Awesome. So things just lined up for you. So that is perfect.
Yeah, it just makes sense, right?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So
Yeah,
I like to hear the story because that tells me so much more about how you got here. So thank you for sharing your
yeah.
story.
Thank you for asking.
Yeah. So why don't we start by talking about mitochondria and fatigue and connect the dots, because I know it's not commonly understood. Uh, so many people suffer from chronic fatigue, but we do not connect the dots that it could be coming from mitochondria. So we all know that mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, but I want you to share the wisdom as to how we can connect the dots and how people can overcome chronic fatigue.
Yeah, it's interesting. The as you said, the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell and the major generator of our energetic currency ATP, adenosine triphosphate. And it's interesting, how it kind of all works and the origins of mitochondria from an evolutionary biological perspective is said to be, and the name for this is known as the endosymbiotic theory, and where the mitochondria is postulated to be historical remnants of cyanobacteria that was engulfed by our what is now eukaryotic cell. And this cyanobacteria has very unique DNA and just different cellular organelle functions. So this endosymbiotic theory of mitochondrial acquisition and how it works with our cells to just produce the energetic currency and resources needed for just oxidative phosphorylation, which is the main biochemical reaction that takes place using again certain sugars and fats to help with the production of energy. So there's a lot of very interesting dynamics with mitochondria as a whole, including that it's maternally inherited. our mitochondria come from our mothers.
Mm-hmm.
So our mitochondrial DNA is completely different than our nuclear DNA, which is, genetically inherited half from our biological mother and half from our biological father, and that leads to our nuclear DNA. But our mitochondrial DNA is strictly inherited from our maternal or biological mother. And in general, the mitochondria is, I think, a very important component to just all of life as a whole, not just fatigue, but just, it goes up on the organizational ladder from mitochondrial, which is a intracellular organelle, to the actual cell, and cells together make, tissue, and tissues make organs, and organs provide function, and function regulates overall physiology. So, mitochondria are found in all of our tissues except for red blood cells. And they're involved, like I said, with ATP production. And they're incredibly sensitive to environmental factors through this process of oxidative phosphorylations. And they have all these different complexes within the mitochondria that influences the ability to generate energy. And these complexes are very dependent on different nutritional cofactors, different vitamins, and micronutrients that influence the electron transport from one complex to another down the chain, so to speak. And simple things like environmental toxicants and even antibiotics. Certain antibiotics have been shown directly to blunt mitochondrial function. And the principles behind that is, again, because of that endosymbiotic theory, that
Wow.
these mitochondria are derived from cyanobacteria. So they're theoretically, very closely resembling bacteria uh, in nature. So, needless to say, there's specific subunits within mitochondria that could be targeted by antibiotics, thereby blunting its function and its ability to perform. And then, not to mention, there's all these different things that influence mitochondrial biogenesis, which is the actual the fission or the duplication of mitochondria. There's mitophagy, which is a recycling of mitochondria when it becomes old and worn out and needs to be recycled into new kind of organelles. And there's mitochondrial fission, which is involved with the actual process of this ATP generation. So there's all these different dynamic biological processes that are taking place within the mitochondria for its autoregulation. So again, environmental factors strongly influence mitochondrial function. Environmental toxicants and exposures influence its ability to perform. And as you know, we live in a toxic world. From the air we breathe, the water we drink, even our thoughts, words, actions, and behaviors could be deemed, kind of blunting to mitochondrial function as a whole. So it's, in regards to how it influences, disease, physiology, and fatigue. Obviously, if we're not, able to perform at our peak performance for whatever reason it is, due to toxicant exposure, poor behaviors, or, antibiotics, drugs, and medications, all those factors really influence our ability to have optimally function mitochondria. Other drugs and medications like atorvastatin, or just statins as a whole, which is a commonly prescribed medication for high cholesterol. Um, those are known as HMG coenzyme A reductase inhibitors, and that coenzyme A is a very critical component for mitochondrial health. And a lot of the reasons why individuals might develop some, myalgias or muscle aches and pains and discomforts, and even in more severe cases, transaminitis or liver enzyme elevations, is due to uh, the mechanism of the statin drug. Now there are, genetic factors that influence that as well, in regards to specific genes and metabolism of, the drug out of our system, and those metabolites accumulating in our system from a pharmacogenetic perspective. But as a whole, there's so many different things working against our mitochondria, unfortunately, and it's our jobs to be aware and conscious of these different factors influencing things so that we can maximize its performance. And nothing beats, positive thinking, good, good information. So different, we're receiving different signals and inputs environmentally that's influencing our gene expression. So I teach my students, that, not only is food medicine, Hippocrates said, let your food be thy medicine be thy food. But we now know that food is information communicating with our DNA, influencing gene expression, including, our mitochondrial DNA expression. So multiple things influence it, including our foods and, thoughts, words, actions, behaviors, and multiple environmental factors. And if you're feeling fatigue, it's time to do a biological audit to see what's happening, under the hood, so to speak, biochemically, and also to do an environmental audit to see what kind of exposures we have influencing, our exposome. And our exposome is the accumulation of everything that, we're exposed to environmentally that influences our epigenetic expression. Yeah. I don't know if that answered it, but
Yes, no, that we need to hear that from you. So that's awesome. So from what I gathered, what we want our viewers to leave with is they want to make sure they have a biological audit, and they also do an audit of their environment to see where those toxins are coming from, and if they are not eliminating, focus on that.
yeah.
Such that they are eliminating those toxins. And there are, like you said, there are also drugs that they are taking on a day-to-day basis, which can again impact their mitochondria. And I also love that you mentioned good thoughts, because in medicine we typically just focus on getting healthy, but yes, thoughts is so important. So I'm so glad that you brought about that point as well. And obviously, I'm a nutritionist, so I love the idea that food is information, and we need to focus on those therapeutic foods such that our mitochondria gets healthy. So that's wealth of information. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
And so, Dr. Bajnat, can you talk to the nutrients? Those are that would be important for a healthy mitochondria.
Mhm. It's interesting. There's so many different nutrients that are on the market that have been marketed towards mitochondrial health and optimization. And, I got to say that one of my favorites is going to be, CoQ10, ubiquinol. There are different forms of CoQ10 on the market: ubiquinone, ubiquinine, ubiquinol, and you want the reduced form of CoQ10 so it has more antioxidant potential. So that's, one of the, cofactors that I think is very important, really easily available, commercially available, that has tremendous therapeutic benefit. Most practicing physicians, when I was at Cleveland Clinic, in med, and on a rotation in med school, I just remember that the physicians there, every time they prescribed a statin medication, they made sure to recommend CoQ10 to their patients. And that was one of the few institutions that I had the privilege of, rotating through that acknowledged that association. So CoQ10 to me is a big one. There are multiple different antioxidants out on the market, alpha lipoic acid, which is also very important. Complex, for the dehydrogenase complexes in the TCA cycle, which feeds into the oxidative phosphorylation. There's these PQQ antioxidants. NAD is a big one. Everybody, is talking about NAD and its ability to help with mitochondrial health and ATP production. So I think that has some tremendous value, as well as like its different isoforms, NMN, NMR. I lean towards NMN, generally speaking, in regards to NAD recycling. All these different, even all these different nutritional ingredients influence mitochondrial health as a whole. And, I also think looking at it from a membrane level, because the mitochondria also has its unique molecular composition with, these F2 subunits and all the different cofactors needed for the inner cristae and folding of the mitochondria. And so I think making sure we get a healthy, rich source of phospholipids in our diet, generally speaking, is going to be important for fortifying not just cell membrane health, the as for the whole cell, but also mitochondrial health as well, structural health. Um, so there's so many different nutrients that are out there that are marketed towards it. But I think ultimately is, looking at the environment of our internal chemistry, or the milieu, or just looking at how that influences not just our mitochondrial function, but our gene expression. And that's heavily predicated on the information that we're feeding our body. I always growing up, I had a saltwater aquarium, right? And in this aquarium, it was such a pain in the ass to maintain. Oh my gosh, it was beautiful with all the flowers and mushrooms and all the exotic fish. But when it came down to it, the physiology of maintaining that saltwater aquarium was very similar to our internal cellular physiology and milieu.
Wow.
The pH had to be spot on at 7.3 in order for the coral to thrive. If the nitrates got elevated, we had to change the water, add magnesium, decrease the ammonia. So I think there's a lot of paralleling associations of the ocean or a saltwater aquarium as it comes down to our physiology and maintaining an internal milieu that's consistent with with us thriving, and it's just very interesting to see the similarities in physiology, and that internal milieu is what dictates everything, influences everything. So there's multiple doctors historically that have spoken about this. I kind of think it stems with the argument between Antoine Béchamp and Louis Pasteur. Louis Pasteur is one of the great minds, and accredited with proposing the germ theory model of disease, where basically conducted a series of experiments, and these experiments basically concluded that the microbe from outside comes into the body and creates disease, where the opposing argument is that the internal milieu is makes it conducive for these organisms to come in and take up residence in our host, and they could thrive and proliferate and cause disease. So, it's very interesting. There's a book written about this, in regards to Antoine Béchamp versus Louis Pasteur, terrain theory versus, germ theory. And I think that's very important, especially in light of, recent events with, pandemic issues and whatnot, that, we focus and try our best to control our internal terrain.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes, I wish everyone has a aquarium like you did, so that they can see they can correlate what's going on inside of them, because we just throw so many insults at us on a day-to-day basis without realizing what damage we are causing internally, because we can't see. But hopefully, if everyone has an aquarium, they can hopefully connect the dots and relate just like you did, and hopefully they don't do that insult on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, no, aquariums are, again, so difficult to manage. I don't wish that upon anybody, but they're beautiful,
They're
go to the
beautiful,
local
yes.
aquarium. But it's very interesting to see, how that correlates to our physiology, and looking at the milieu and
Yeah.
everything else. Yeah.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So then I love that idea that as you mentioned, the nutrients are important, like CoQ10, alpha lipoic acid. They can definitely help overcome the fatigue or the unhealthy mitochondria people has. But looking at the root cause in the long term is going to solve the problem, because yes, you can take those nutraceuticals and feel better, but it's just like taking a medication to resolve your acidity with an antacid, but that's not going to solve the problem. So I love the idea that yes, those nutrients would be helpful, but we need to remove the insult which is coming to that person from their environment, from their drugs, because only then they'll get to the root cause and be able to solve the underlying issue.
Exactly. And, we've adopted a green allopathic mindset in this space of, even functional medicine, where it's like, oh, just take these supplements instead of drugs, in certain respects, but don't address some of the root causes. If we don't optimize our MLFs, modifiable lifestyle factors, which sleep, nutrition, exercise, meaning and purpose, healthy relationships, and stress management, nothing's going to work. All of those need to be on a daily basis optimized. Your exercise every day, 1% better with that. Your sleep. I love tracking my data with sleep. I've got my Aura ring. I've got a sleep number mattress. So I'm always getting this information about my sleep quality and scores, and trying to mitigate anything that could influence and disrupt my sleep. Um, stress is such a big thing. Everybody's allostatic load or stress burden is very important to look at. It's all personal, and
Right.
toxic relationships, all those things influence us in our milieu, and we need to make sure that we're working hard to just try to achieve homeodynamic balance within our bodies on a daily basis, 1% better every day. Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. And doctor, can you share a case study of a patient that you would have worked with, who would have come into your office with poor mitochondrial health, and how you help him enhance it,
Yeah.
such that people get an insight as to how functional medicine can help them, and how. But I just want them to leave them with that hope that there is a way to overcome it.
Yeah, yeah. Oh man, I don't specifically mitochondria. Um, it's really hard to say because a mitochondria is influenced by shifting the milieu as a whole. But there are numerous case studies where it's like we're looking at some of the underlying physiology and biochemistry. We're looking at the nutrition, and it's like even the seed oils, right? All these pro-inflammatory oils,
Yep.
vegetable oil, grapeseed oil, rapeseed oil, soybean oil, and all these different sunflower oil. All these oils are incredibly pro-inflammatory, loaded with omega-6, varying heat indexes, and they release smoke into our cells and into our mitochondria, and accelerate a membrane lipid peroxidation and increase malondialdehyde and all these inflammatory markers. So, starting with nutrition, cutting out the pro-inflammatory things, is where I start with my patients always, and then looking at micronutrient deficiencies, because again, as we said, all these different micronutrients influence our body's ability to perform. They're essential.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I mean, I could tell you cases about thyroid, hormones, and cardiometabolic issues, where, if you start peeling back the layers and working on stress reduction, increasing cardiac coherence through heart rate variability, mindfulness based practice, you work on the nutrition, like I said, with eliminating the pro inflammatory, introducing and repleting the micronutrient deficits, and then you work on just gentle restorative exercises and matching the exercise to that person. I've got athletes that I try to take care of all my jujitsu guys, and then I've got people with bilateral osteoarthritis of the knee. Some people have undergone knee transplants and everything else, and their range of mobility is limited, so their exercise is a little bit limited. But working with everyone based on where they're at, medicine, is an N of one approach, right? So my genetics is different than your genetics, despite both of us having probably Southeast Asian, genetic profiles. And, our blueprint's different. Our exposome is different. Our, diets are different. Our stress levels are different. So you got to figure out on on an individual basis what is important for the person sitting in front of you. And sometimes it's drugs and medications, like you have to get people medically optimized first and foremost based on the standards of care. And then once that happens, you could start, working on the back end to optimize, all the issues, and then peel back the layers of the medications if needed. So that's kind of how I operate. But I could tell you stories all day about hormonal optimization. Young guys with testosterones in the 300s, 400s, 200s sometimes, and they aren't. Some guys are like, oh, just give me testosterone. Some guys are like, hey, let me try, working on some of my MLFs. I have that discussion with them, again, meeting them where they're at in life. And you could see natural rises in testosterone level by several hundred points, once they dial in the sleep and the exercise is dialed in, and nutrition is healthy, and you could see that their body responds. The HPGA axis starts reawakening. The ferritin levels and inflammatory markers go down. The LH and FSH start rising, as does the testosterone naturally. Same thing with thyroid. So there's a lot of micronutrient nutritional associations that play a role in this, and there's a lot of environmental factors. Thyroid's a big one in regard to free radical halogenation. One last nerdy comment. One of the second to last column in the periodic table is the halogen column, right? Chlorine, fluorine, bromine, and then iodine. So if we're exposed to chlorine in the water, bromine in the water, fluorine in the toothpaste and the water, and everywhere else in some of the nonstick pans, that's going to displace the body's utilization of iodine, thereby rendering our thyroid less responsive, because the chlorine, fluorine, bromine are more have a stronger electromagnetic field and weight compared to the not weight, but field compared to the iodine, and it will displace the iodine from our system. So again, simple things like that, mercury in our mouth, from silver fillings, that's a big one that I see. So those
Wow.
are the kind of root causes that you have to look at. If you're not addressing the mercury autotoxicity from the dental amalgams, you're not going to get anywhere.
Better. Yes.
And that's where you start in Europe is in the mouth. So, but yeah, I hope that answered your question.
Yes, absolutely it did. And thank you for sharing all those insights, because it's just phenomenal just listening how functional medicine can help, looking at the different points and the different insights, because only then we can connect the dots as to where it's coming from. I love your thing looking into your chlorine, bromine, and fluorine, because that's so commonly missed. And that's why we're like, okay, why is everyone having thyroid issues? Obviously that makes sense, because we don't look at it like that, and just on an ongoing basis we have those insults, which obviously is going to impact thyroid health. So love that you shared that.
Yeah, definitely. There's so many more little nuggets, but
Yes, and I know we can talk on it all day long, but hopefully our listeners got the insights as to where they'll need to start looking at, and what things they can remove and what they can add. Because add and remove is, at times we just keep on adding. Okay, we go to Costco and just pick a bunch of random supplements, start taking those. Yes, those would definitely help, but you definitely need to look into removing those insults, because only then we can bring about that balance.
I love
So
Costco. Oh my God. I love Costco. But yeah, no, it's very interesting with all that stuff. So it's a part of my intake with the Institute for Human Optimization is I have a very labor intensive intake. I feel, yeah, a lot of people, once, they start it, they're like, oh my goodness, it's like pages and pages and pages from childhood history and exposure to, I think one of the more important components of the intake is the environmental detox section of the intake, which looks at all the potential hidden sources. It's like, why are you asking me what kind of cosmetic products I use? The average person, by the time they finish, getting ready in the morning, is exposed to over 150 different chemicals, right off the bat.
that's
So
nice.
All these different things influence our exposome, and not to mention the dental history and everything else that's a part of the intake. So it's putting all those pieces together, root cause analysis, and making sense of it and translating into an actionable kind of plan and blueprint for people to follow so that they could improve their health outcomes.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And those are wonderful insights. And doctor, before we end this call, can you share with our listeners how can people find you, and if they want to work with you, can you share your website or your contact details?
Yeah, so I'm all over the internet. I have my institute and private practice, Institute for Human Optimization, ifho.org, is the website. We are also all over social media, Instagram, Institute for Human Optimization, or Dr. Anil Bajnath, doctor spelt out. And yeah, so I'm all over. Yeah, and I could give you some additional contact information that you could post as well, needed.
Perfect. Yes, I'll put it in the comment section so that way people can find you. And again, thank you so much for your time and sharing the wisdom with all our listeners.
Thank you. Awesome. Take care.